loud because we're having audio challenges
I know you
tonight. Okay.
She accused me of being a big mouth. Can anyone hear me? All right. I'm Robert Sullivan, Bobby, to those who've known me for a while. The only reason I came is because I wanted to get an idea of what you folks do. Heather kind of filled me in a little bit about the neighborhood groups. I'm involved in a new neighborhood group, which she wanted me to tell you guys about, and so I'm gonna. It's called Oneida Square Arts District Association, OSADA, O-S-A-D-A, maybe you've heard of it. We formed a year and a half ago because we felt like that neighborhood didn't really have the kind of representation that you folks do, as evidenced by your attendance here, which is really great. And so we kind of want to join the lexicon of neighborhood groups so that we can help you guys organize. We are a 501c3, so we do have our tax exempt status. So I had said to Heather, you know, in the future maybe we can work with other neighborhood groups on projects that we might need to apply for a grant for or raise money for. I don't know, are you guys a 501?
No.
You're not? We are, so don't bother. Use us. And so, I mean, that's basically why I'm here. Yeah, we say Oneida Square Arts District Association, but the boundaries kind of go from really rough boundary count here. Lincoln Ave, picture, if you can, Lincoln Ave, Court Street over to Hopper, up Kemble, to Clinton Place, over Clinton Place, over to Oswego, back to Lincoln. So kind of a chunk of the old city, as we call it, the old town, which kind of, you know, everyone likes to say, well, that part of it is, well, it's West Utica. Well, West Utica is kind of historically on the other side of the arterial, kind of the other side of what used to be the canal. So you guys, South Utica, I believe, if I'm wrong, correctly starts at the Parkway. What's that?
I feel like it does.
Yeah, well, I mean, if that's what we say, that's what it is, right? So we all agree, it starts at the Parkway. But from Clinton Place to the Parkway, there's a group called the Midtown Utica Association. I don't know if they're involved with you guys. So they're not involved with you, but maybe we got them involved, or you got them involved. But anyway, the more the better, right? The more the merrier. Kind of strengthen numbers and all that kind of stuff. So it's not just Oneida Square, but because we kind of look at Oneida Square as the geographic heart of our district, the center of it, and kind of like, you know, the center of the arts district, which, by the way, I don't know, Brian, if you're going to back me up on this, but correct me if I'm wrong.
All right.
Because one of the things we've discovered when we were talking about this, I mean, we weren't so, like, full of ourselves that we decided to call ourselves the Arts District. That was kind of done for us by the state when they did the arterial project 10 years ago. They started to do some wayfaring labels and some maps. And one of the things that, if you go on Google now, it pops up Arts District. So we were kind of like, oh, gee. And then we called Brian down at City Hall and called his office and asked if there was anybody kind of doing anything to start an arts district in where at least DOT decided the arts district should be. No, there weren't. Okay, that's kind of cool. I mean, we can use the arts to kind of step into a neighborhood group that really just wants to represent the neighborhood. Working with Munson and, you know, whoever else down there, players, Stanley, whoever else wants to work together. And we've had pretty good luck so far. I mean, we got our not-for-profit status. That's pretty good. Anyway, that's where we are. I appreciate you letting me come here. And I if anyone has a question, they can ask it. Yes.
Can you tell me more about like the mission of your organization or some projects that you're working on or topics that are being discussed at your meetings?
Absolutely. The mission of our organization is probably, first and foremost, the mission of your organization. So whatever you guys want to see happen or want to do, that's the same thing we want to do. We also would like to work with interested people and parties on some things that would be a little more arts oriented. So for instance, working in the future if an agency wants to do more artist housing, more storefronts for potential galleries, street art, stuff like that. As you know, Rusty Green is doing a mural on the Munson Dance Building, which is going to start soon. And keep your eye on it because it's amazing. Like the young man who went to Pratt and he designed it. He's dynamic. It's going to be beautiful. So we want to promote art. We want to promote security. What's that three-word thing we say, Brian? Friendly, safe, and something. You know, Alicia Dix always said it. Friendly, safe, and yeah. Anyway, we want friendly, safe, clean, safe, and friendly neighborhood, right? Clean, safe, and friendly. Is that secure? Yeah, all those good things. You know, and we haven't had that down there, or I live down there on Cottage Place, which has been in the news lately. But it's not what they say it is. People kind of look at us down there, as I'm sure a couple of neighborhoods up here that used to be really secure, people like now go, oh, where? So we don't want people to roll their eyes anymore at our neighborhood. So that's one of our big goals too, is and the eye rolling. We want to be proud of where we live. So it's as simple as that.
If people are interested in what you're doing, do you have to be a resident of that area to get involved?
Absolutely not. You have to have a pulse.
Okay. So maybe
If you can prove to us that you're alive, you can get involved.
If we can share maybe your contact information in the meeting
The best
email that
thing
we send out.
right now, what I can tell you is the best thing is go on Facebook and join the page.
I'll send an email with all that
Yeah.
information for you guys too.
Because, I mean, that's what they do. That's what these kids do now. They put everything on email, or everything on Facebook. So, I mean, is that okay? Anybody can't access Facebook?
I'm on the page and there's a lot of stuff going on there, a lot of conversation, so it's a cool page to be a part of, so I do recommend
Yeah.
that you guys all take the opportunity to join the page.
It's fun. Yes, sir.
Where do you meet and when?
Lately we've been actually meeting in the Munson Dance Studio building right on Genesee Street because Nancy Long, who is the longtime 30-year dance instructor at Munson, she's also the president. Robbie Gendrono is the vice president. Robbie has a really cool history. I hope you all get to meet him someday. He's Indonesian by way of Los Angeles, and he discovered Utica and fell in love with it, so that he didn't relocate here. He leased his house in Hollywood out, and he bought a big mansion on Campbell Street, and it's a hugely successful bed and breakfast, Airbnb. So much so that he bought another one on Clinton and Oneida, a big brown shingle house, and he's restoring that. And that's going to be his second. And he's had a couple parties, and he's had like people from Los Angeles and Manhattan and England, London, and you know, you're in this house, this mansion on Campbell Street, and you're like,
It's beautiful.
and these people are all raving about Utica, and they're from all over the world, and I'm like, what? Really? And they're like, yeah, this place is great. We want to buy houses. Good. You know what? That's all it takes, right? People just think we're great. And you know what? One thing Robbie said, was the worst thing that happens to him when he books a week or a weekend or a stay with people who know local people. The local people call the people who booked and say, don't go there, it's dangerous. Don't go there, you'll be murdered. Don't go there, you'll be, have a and he had, to their, you know, credit, most of them have come and stayed anyway. They're like, this is incredible. This can't be what they were talking about. So the locals talk down the guy from Los Angeles, and you know, and they look at me, some of these guys I know from these cities, they say, come on, this is what you call crime. This is the worst you got. Campbell Street, we'll take it. They can't believe we think it's also dangerous. I mean, they're from real danger, you know, real cities. So, and I'm the treasurer, and Mary Murray, who is the Director of Contemporary Art at Munson, is the secretary. So we have a nice mix of people on the board.
May I ask, what's the name of your association?
OSADA, Oneida Square Arts District Association. OSADA. Look for it on Facebook.
And I'll put it out again in the email.
Yeah, but it's cool. There's some cool stuff happening. It's, you know, just if you want to know about certain things that are going on, like the B&Bs. I mean, you might want to use them sometime. They just made a movie in Utica, right? Brian?
They did.
What was it? Who was in it? Who's the star?
Chevy Chase.
Okay then.
Thank you, Brian.
They stayed at the house. They stayed at the house, and they filmed scenes of the house, in the house. I think it was supposed to be in London. But by staying in the house, they talked to somebody who mentioned the Fort Schuyler Club. So they all went down to the Fort Schuyler Club, and they were like, my God, it was exactly what they wanted, and they didn't spend any money building it. So now these producers and these Hollywooders and stuff are like, Utica? Yeah, that's a cool town. We can make a movie there. And there's worse things to be known for, right? So yeah, it's pretty cool. It's pretty fun time to be in Utica. We like it. Everything's going right well. Right? Right, Brian?
Absolutely.
Knocking it out of the park, Brian.
Do our best.
God. Anything else? Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Do you have any affiliation with the art space housing that's going to be going up somewhere?
Yeah, you
It's
know what,
moving.
the whole that's one of the reasons why we kind of curved made sure that the boundary curved around Hopper to Park, and then Park up Kemble. Of course, we also want to include Robbie's B&B on Kemble, so we massage the district a little bit. But we think it would be great. We know some of the people involved. It's just nothing's really happening a lot, so there's not much we can really work with them on. But, you know, we're a new fledgling organization too. We haven't really, you know, I'd be lying to say if I had a whole laundry list of accomplishments, but we have planning, you know, and planning, as Brian will tell you, is the most important thing of all. You know, what is it? Fail to plan to fail. So we're gonna plan. And if you guys want to help us, great.
Journey starts with the first step, right?
Journey starts with the first step. We didn't know this was going to be an inspirational meeting. Is anybody ordained? Well, that's our next one. Anyway, yes, ma'am.
Just that abbreviation once again on Facebook.
OSADA, Oneida Square Arts District Association.
How is Nancy Long doing?
What's that?
How is Nancy Long doing?
She's dancing, doing okay. Always up there dancing. Yes, ma'am. We don't have anything to do with the sidewalk art show. I just heard though that the sidewalk art show is actually not going to happen this year. It's going to be actually moved inside the museum. because they're gonna start construction of their
Oh, they are?
$1 million front yard, something or other. Anyone who's a member, if you got your monthly bulletin, there's some beautiful artist renderings of it in there. So it's gonna be really cool. So for this year, they're gonna move it in. One of the things Osada wants to do is actually join with them and work on making the Summer Arts Festival maybe more diverse, maybe more different kinds of activities, maybe getting the library and maybe Thea Bowman and other organizations involved. You know, who knows? Check things out, see what goes on. What else? Anyone else?
You've got a very diverse group of people there, from the folks at Munson who are very, among the leaders of the community, and then the poor homeless folks on United Square at the
Yeah.
Plymouth. So
The homeless folks.
how are you
well,
going to address that issue?
We don't know. Since the wall, I hate to say this because it sounds kind of mean, but since the wall fell out of the church, they've all been gone. Maybe it was a divine intervention until we figured it out. That's, you know what, the homeless, that's a problem we can all share.
Right.
So we don't have, we're not going to solely address it, but the whole community is going to eventually address it.
Right.
And we're going to eventually have to figure it out.
And other cities are too.
Yeah, and because we don't want to turn into tent city with those things everywhere. But that's a conversation for people above my retirement grade.
Any other questions?
We certainly found an engaged group of people here.
Yes, good. It's great. South Utica. I lived in South Utica once up on Beverly Place. I loved my time in South Utica. My sister lives on Arlington Road, so we have a lot of connections. My dad was brought up in South Utica, so we love South Utica.
Well, thank you for coming and telling us all about OSADA, and we will share your information.
Love it. Thank you. We appreciate
Maybe you'll see some of
it.
these faces at your next meeting.
I welcome as many people as we can get. Thank you.
Okay, so we're in kind of the free-form part of our agenda. Heather, wait, don't come here because you have information about the hospital committee.
There's not much. They have their committee set. They're working on, they have their committee set. They're working on things, and they will be letting us know about the next meeting coming, hopefully in March. We're still waiting to hear. So that's pretty much where we're at right now. There's not much more to say. They have both the committees. They're trying to get together, get a meeting set up for all of us. So we're kind of on a standstill at the moment. So does that sound all right?
Yes, I'm still hopeful that the steering committee, that the mayor made his adjustments to the steering committee to include more neighbors, more South Utica residents. There's a steering committee that's been set for later this week, and at that point, I'm hoping to schedule the next neighborhood meeting or public meeting from there. I don't have a schedule yet. I'm still hopeful that it'll be this month, probably towards the end of the month, or if not, the beginning of next month.
May I ask a question? I'm glad to hear that there's just more neighbors and residents. How did you bring those people on board or select them?
They were the mayor's selection. In addition, the previous mayor did appoint Ron Picaro and then Don McGann, who are two local residents, neighbors of St. E's property. Mayor Galimi added Lindsay Bonanza, who is on the opposite side of Genesee Street. He also added John Brown, who is a South Utica resident and very familiar with the real estate market.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was on and then Councilman Betar, as well as County Ledge Representative Tim Julian, were added. The previous mayor allowed both of them, asked both of them to nominate residents as well. I believe legislator Julian has asked Steve Rafaro to be part of the meeting. And Councilman Betar asked Peggy Flemma. Peggy Flemma is Councilman Betar's nominee.
St. Luke's folks, I think they're having, or they've already had one public meeting. You're gonna have 3 more public meetings, and I think there are about 4 advisory council meetings that happen between February and September where they'll present the options. How many do we plan to have here in Utica?
What's that?
St. Luke's has had some meetings already. Wondering how many do you plan?
Yeah,
to
they
have?
had about 4 meetings for the public and then about 4 meetings of the advisory council. They'll be presenting their final plans in September. Wondering how many meetings we're going to be having here regarding St. Elizabeth's.
We've had one public meeting already.
Right.
We expect there to be a neighborhood meeting shortly. And the scope of work for the consultant team includes a seeker. We're expecting this to be a generic environmental impact statement. So there is a scoping meeting that has to be, a public scoping meeting that has to be held as part of that process. So there will be at least 2 more.
Is that Utica or is that New Hartford or New York Mills? That property?
St. E's is strictly Utica. St. Luke's is New Hartford.
Hello everyone, I'm kind of going to slide over here a little bit, so everyone can hear me. I haven't met. I'm the current representative here in South Utica. I've come tonight to answer questions that we have, provide an update on recent happenings in the council. You know, the big thing has been, well, first I'll say it's nice to come to one of these meetings and have it be daylight out, so that's the first thing. So right now on the council, we've been discussing the proposed budget. Amendments have been proposed, discussions are set to be had. March 20th is the date the council will vote on our budget. There's a public meeting at 7 p.m. that will occur before that vote. Right now we're in the process of setting up several special meetings to introduce perhaps further amendments and just discuss the amendments that are already in committee. So with that, does anyone have preliminary questions on where we are in the budget process, any proposed amendments, any general comments or questions?
I've been to meetings. I come here to meet all the time, even though I'm part of one deal. I didn't know that because I live right here. It's right across the street. Across the street. I used to think this is my area, but now it's all here. My question is, I've been hearing fire department, large things on the equipment, salary rate.
Can everybody hear what you're saying?
No.
Sorry, it's so loud here, you gotta really.
Okay. As I've been attending the meetings, I've been hearing things like new equipment for the fire department. I'm ex-police, so I know that a lot of police, they mostly get their things from grants, so they were pretty much covered. And salaries. So my question is, like someone mentioned the other day, if we're in such a crisis, you know, how important are these new salaries? You know, what is there wiggle room? Is there a lot of people in the same position? Is more one person wearing more hats? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Where I'm from, in Mississippi, you start at the top, you look for management. Where can I cut there first? You know, where can I kind of decrease my overhead for who are employed here? So what I hear is you need more people employed, but you don't have some people's position in some places. Well, the mayor doesn't have some people's position in some places. But when it comes to salary, how much of a salary were they actually, because that's what I really couldn't hear. They're saying they want to give raises to who and how much. You know, because if we're going to pay for raises, I want a raise. You see what I'm saying? So how long has it been since these people have had raises? And if you can remember, where were these raises coming from?
So the question is regarding raises in the police and fire department specifically. So last year, The city and the fire department did come to an agreement on a retroactive contract that I think somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.5 million when there was no contract. So we already have to take that into account. There's about $1.5 million retroactively having to be taken out because the contract from several years
Louder, Joe.
The contract from several years ago was settled. So that's the first thing to look at. Also, we have to keep in mind that the fire department and the police department account for a majority of the overall budget. I don't know the exact percentage, I don't want to give an incorrect number, but it's a substantial, I think it's more than half, let's say that. So per the city charter, there's a certain number of fire and a certain number of police that are in each complement. So those positions have been agreed upon and negotiated. So those positions are right in our city charter, for anyone who wants to take a look at those numbers. With your question regarding when's the last time certain members received raises, so they are union. So there's going to be negotiations between the union leaders and parts of the government. So my understanding is certain raises may be statutory, not discretionary. And we are getting grants right now with the fire department. I believe 8 of our firemen are on, firefighters are on the SAFER grant. That's 8 that are on a federal grant that we, I think it sunsets after a couple of years. I don't know the exact year that funding ends. But, you know, at this point in the process, we have been looking line by line, and I can give an example. I mentioned a complement. Now, right now in the police complement, it's been agreed upon that there's 22 investigator positions. We were reviewing the budget and recognized in the table of organization there was accidentally 23 listed. So a proposed amendment is going to come through to take that into account, that there was an extra line of the budget to hopefully save somewhere around $90,000. So I mean, as we look through these things, salaries and different things, we have to understand that some of them are contractual based on the retroactive pay of $1.5 million. Some of them are negotiated through the union, and some others may be statutory. And as you mentioned, some positions may be filled with either ARPA money, as is the case in the police department, and some may be filled with grants, such as the SAFER grant in the fire department. You know, that being said too, I think we need to balance that we are being proposed a 16.5% increase in our taxes. So we certainly have to approach that and submit amendments to reasonably lower that number, while also balancing the continued need for public safety. Police and fire in our areas, we certainly don't want a situation where we may save the taxpayers a certain amount of money, but now calls for fire and police calls double or triple, because I don't think that would help us as a city when we're saving, you know, 4 or 5% of taxes, but now we're running into situations where the response time is 40 minutes because those were essential workers there. So it is a balance, but did I fully answer your question, or is there anything else that
No.
Okay.
Joe,
Yeah.
she asked about how long expenses the firemen had raised.
Yes.
4 years,
Well,
they've
that
been
goes
going
into
into buildings.
the contract that was
Yeah,
retroactively
but I
passed.
mean,
and
they
yes.
deserve this raise.
Yeah, and you know, it's, and that 1.5 million, I believe, is all paid the upcoming fiscal year, so it's not something that's piecemeal throughout, let's say, the next 10 years or so. It's something that is
I
taken
don't
into
take
account.
away from public safety.
Oh, of course not, yeah, that's why I
I
say
know,
it.
I don't want to go in a burning building.
Well, exactly, it is a balance, and they do very hard work, so, you know, when we approach this, we're approaching it from the side of, can we reasonably get that 16.5% down while maintaining our infrastructure and essential services? So that's kind of where I'm at. I can't speak for anyone else, but that's my
No,
approach.
and I agree with
Sure.
I hear that the firehouses are in pretty bad shape. Can they be fixed up?
So right now, and you know, we're fortunate enough, members of the council, to go along on a facilities tour of the police station and several fire stations. For example, on Whitesboro Street, we've gone to that station, and we're doing repairs. There's no one currently, at least as of last month, there was no firefighters at that location because it was being repaired, doing maintenance, different things. From what I hear, this isn't 100%, but just to get an idea, South Utica on Shepherd Place, there's been talks about providing upgrades to that fire station because it's a very old fire station, and back when those fire stations were built, 80, 90 years ago, they didn't anticipate the weight of the rigs that we have now. So the basement, and we were down there in the basement, you could actually see it's kind of bowing. And that's something that's at an infrastructure level that has to be addressed. So to answer your question, they were making repairs to the Whitesboro Street fire station. And I think there has been at least talk of exploring the possibility of making repairs to our fire station here on Shepherd Place.
Can there ever be a brand new one? Can they ever start to build a brand new one?
Sure, and I think that would essentially come down to funding. And looking at a cost analysis, would it be more beneficial to repair what we have or build new? So let's say we repaired what we have, and these are just examples. If we were to repair what we had and it were to last 20 years versus building new and it were to last 40, what would make more sense? And I think that's part of the conversation. What would make more sense financially? What would make most sense for the safety of our fire department and those types of considerations?
Thank you.
Whatever you can do not cut police or fire personnel manpower, because we need those guys on the streets.
So the comment was not to cut police or fire because we need those individuals on the street. I don't think any proposed amendments have been submitted to make cuts to personnel in the police or fire department or reduce those complements. And if there were, and I've said this publicly before, if there were those proposals to cut that complement, I personally wouldn't support it because I think these are essential services. And as I mentioned before, we can't run into a situation where response times are doubling or tripling. So that's at least my stance on that.
Can you speak to any of the other amendments that I know you guys have gone line by line and have some ideas about how you can cut that back?
Sure. So the question was speaking to some of the amendments that had been submitted, the proposed revisions to different things. So really they come in, at least the way I see it, they come in two sides. Increases to proposed revenue or cuts to existing lines. And I can give a few examples. Looking first at proposed revenue, looking at sales tax, I think the county this year is projecting 8.1% increase in sales tax. So when looking at those numbers, comparing it to the county, neighboring cities such as Schenectady or Troy, and then balancing that out to see, and this is all a projection. I mean, it's called an annual estimate for a reason. It is, you are projecting out and estimating certain things. So that's one example of an increase to revenue. An example of a proposed cut or reduction. So, in going through these lines, I think it was brought to our attention that one of the lines, I think with a specific example that just came across recently. So the playground department, the salary proposed was, let's say, $74,000 with an additional $107,000 in wages and $35,000 in overtime. So that was $207,000 that we were presented with in the playground department. Now, many of you are aware that an employer has to pay a certain percentage into Social Security. And if you look throughout our budget, it comes out in other departments to be about 7.65%. So in the playground line, it appears to me at least there was a clerical error typo, where instead of that 7.65%, it said $74,000. So I mean that's 74,000 minus 15,000, that's 50-something odd thousand that it looks like it was just improperly input. So now that's going to be a proposed amendment to correct that. So looking for those types of things as well, not only what we can cut out of what's been proposed, but things like clerical error, like save us $54,000 to $60,000. So if anyone wants any more specific or has specific questions about certain amendments, I'd be happy to talk about that to the extent anyone's looked at it. I have a question. Sure.
I watched the council meeting last week when some of these ideas were discussed. And one that you had discussed was the vacant property registry.
Yeah.
And I understand it's going to take some time to get all that in place. Like, it's not going to be a quick fix.
Yeah.
But it seems real feasible, and also like there's some merit to it, and maybe there's some money there. Do you have an idea what the scope is, like annually, what revenue that might be able to generate?
Yeah, so the question was about a proposed revision accounting for vacant property registration. So generally the intent of a vacant property registration is actually an incentive to property owners to fill the property so they're not vacant. So ideally there'd actually be 0 vacant properties because all the properties are filled, but to the extent they're not, our sister cities such as Schenectady has a vacant property registration that's been on the books and has generated income for the past several years. Now, what was referred to at the budget meeting was, let's say, more negotiation through the union, because the codes department would be the department tasked with going through, seeing which properties are vacant and enforcing that. You know, the issue that we heard from the codes commissioner was, well, they're union employees, so it's beyond the scope of their job description currently, so there'd actually have to be additional funding to add that to their job description in order to enforce that part of the city charter. So, you know, moving forward, things I'd be looking for is to see, you know, the exact portion of the city charter that's on the books, and this was voted in a couple of years ago as part of on the charter. But right now, it's more of an administrative task, and you know, if we were to go that route, to negotiate with the union to see if it was even feasible. But you know, I think that's about it for now on that regard. But yeah.
I know council members said like a year ago, they had mentioned owning a lot of property that's, especially a lot of property that's owned by people that can't reach to own it, it's just sitting there. A lot of, you know, they don't even know who owns it, so they can't collect taxes off of that. Not only that, a lot of houses that have been reappraised, you know, how long has that been? And I know the mayor said, you want to know how much your taxes are going to be called down and see what your house is appraised. So I'm wondering about that, since just in case we can't get it down to a reasonable number, say for instance, just double that, it just stays at 16%. So how can we get those people into ones who we don't know who they are, to make sure they pay what they're supposed to pay, and to, you know, get houses reappraised so everyone is at least fairly paying their share?
Yeah. So the first,
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, the first part of the question, correct me if I'm wrong on this, the first part of the question was, if there are properties who we don't know who the owners are, so there's these individuals or maybe corporations or LLCs, whatever the case may be, that aren't paying their taxes on these properties, how do we track those folks down, or those companies, to make sure they pay? And the second part of the question was regarding reappraisal of properties, because it's been a number of years. With regard to the first question, my understanding from the Department of State's website, you can certainly search a property and see if an entity, whether it's a corporation, an LLC, owns a certain property. But to the second part of your question regarding reappraisal, my understanding is that in and of itself costs a lot of money. Brian, can you speak to that? Reappraisal of properties and reassessment of tax purposes. My understanding is that would be a massive.
You're talking about a revamp? Yeah, it's a lengthy process. It's a fairly expensive process. Probably $1 million.
Yeah.
To hire a consultant to actually do it.
Okay. So that was my understanding too, that to do evaluation of property for tax purposes, that it would cost well, maybe $1 million or so to do that. Well, so that alone costs.
is there a law on the books that after a certain amount of time has passed, that nobody has paid any heed to these properties, paid taxes, anything, they can be taken from them?
So, you know, this is an interesting question, and I think we're gearing toward foreclosure here in that regard. And this came up at the budget meeting as well, houses that were foreclosed upon. What do we do beyond that?
3 years.
Yeah, there's an aspect wrong.
For foreclosure purposes. And this came up, the questions regarding, I suppose, foreclosure, taking back the property, but this issue came up in a recent Supreme Court decision where, let's say someone owes $10,000 in back taxes, and the city takes it and sells it for $20,000. Now, prior to that, a handful of states were taking the $20,000, putting it in an account, while only $10,000 was owed. Based on the Supreme Court case, those states can no longer partake in that practice. So in other words, if they owe $10,000 in taxes, but the house is sold for $20,000, you have to give that person the $10,000, which is the excess of what's owed. And New York was one of those handful of states that participated in the practice that's been recently shot down by the Supreme Court as a Fifth Amendment violation. So right now, the entire state of New York is essentially on pause with what to do with those foreclosure revenues. So it's an interesting question. This case, I think, was decided in 2023. So it's fresh, and there hasn't been a law to fill that gap and remedy that yet.
Maybe the excess should go to a nuisance charge.
Well, and right now, so the excess in these accounts just has not been touched until the state of New York comes up with a new policy or a new guideline on what are allowable uses and what are not allowable uses.
Joe?
Yep.
What's the definition of a vacant property? That's the first part of the question, because if you go down to Florida for 3-4 months of the year, is that automatically a vacant property? And number two, I'm wondering, if you keep your property up, it's properly zoned, you meet all the code requirements, pay your taxes, what business is it of the government to tell you what you can do with the property?
So the first part of the question was, what's the definition of vacant? We were talking about the vacant property registry. I think that's a good question. It's open to statutory interpretation. And for our purposes in our Utica City Code, I think we'd have to look at that and come up with a clear definition based on whether the state of New York has a definition. You mentioned Florida, if they have a definition of vacant, but that's exactly one of the issues with implementation, the actual definition of vacant. The second part of your question, if I understand it correctly, is if someone's keeps up their property, if someone pays their taxes and otherwise is not in violation of any codes provisions,
right,
what business is it of the government to...
What business is it of the government to tell you what you can do with your property if you meet all the requirements of the government?
So if it's properly zoned, properly maintained, there's no codes violations, and you're up to date on your taxes, I don't think it would be. I think as long
yeah, but if you don't want anybody in your property, okay, and you want it vacant for whatever reason, maybe it's an estate problem or something like that, then you're going to be tagged under this registry, you're going to be tagged as a vacant property. I don't see that that's right.
Well, I mean, I think this has been tested in other municipalities. Schenectady, I gave an example. So in terms of legality from that regard, I think it's been deemed valid on a legal basis.
Don't you think it's socialistic?
Well, I mean, look, there's an incentive to not have any vacant properties in a city, and I think I think that's a good aim, because we as a city maybe don't want vacant properties throughout the city, and I think it's a good thing that houses are occupied, because with occupation of homes, you have people spending more money in the community, investing more in the community if they're there living in those homes. So I think the intent is to not have any vacant properties. It's actually an incentive to fill the houses.
Well, the only thing I'll say is the road to hell is paved with good intentions, so.
Are we talking about vacant, or are we talking about abandoned, though?
Yeah, and I think that's part of what we talk about with the definition, because other states have different definitions of vacant. Does it incorporate maybe abandoned? Does it overlap the definition? So I think the statutory interpretation is a big question too.
I think everyone can hear me because I'm a teacher. But anyway, so I think one of the main things that people probably here would like to know is the cause, because even Mayor Bellini's opponent said she would have to have a significant tax raise too. So, is the cause because we've had 0% for so many years, and I believe Mr. Morehouse suggested to the former mayor that there should have been at least a 1% increase over 10 years. Is that the cause? Also, not you, but also past common councilors voted for those budgets. So they're partly responsible if we're in a crisis. Or is the second reason that the former mayor spent inappropriate money? I know it was suggested about the $5 million of the paving that was inappropriately moved from one account to another. Or third is a combination of both. I want people to hear, so I'm pretty loud.
Does anyone have any comments or questions on the statement?
I have a comment. I noticed the previous mayor on his way out, the last 2 or 3 months, announced a large number of new projects, pickleball courts and water slides, I don't know, ice rink, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
I like Utica signs.
Pardon?
Those Utica signs. Utica
Yeah, the Utica signs, several, at least a dozen or a couple dozen different projects, many of which had some state or federal funding support, and that was used to justify undertaking those projects. But given the financial condition of the city at this moment, and given that even on all of those projects, whatever external funding there is only a portion of the real total cost, and the total balance, which is the majority of the funding, has to be made up by local property tax payers or other local resources. A lot of those projects, in my opinion, need to be put on hold or done away with until we can afford to do them properly without an outrageous 16.5% tax increase, which is an insult. It's an insult to the property owners and the citizens and the voters of this city. Those projects should be put on hold or just erased.
So, yeah, just to briefly comment, so the projects from the previous administration, I believe our current mayor has announced at least the suspension or the suspension or ending of at least one, the Buckley Pool water slide.
Yeah,
just as an example.
But
sure, and look, 16.5% is a high number, which is why I don't support it. I mean, that's the exact point, that it is a lot of money, and that's why the council is looking to pass reasonable, responsible amendments to get that 16.5% number down, so we're not hit as a community with a double-digit tax increase. You know, and I hear, and I'll just make a brief comment on this. We hear a lot about. I've heard certain proponents say, you know, $500 a year. That's $40 to $42 a month, but we all know that's not how our property taxes are paid. They're paying 3 balloon payments, January 31st in April and July. So we're not looking at $40 to $42 a month. You're looking at $250 here, $150 here, $150 here. And I think we have to understand that it's not broken down into monthly payments or daily payments, that these are 3 large balloon payments. And the folks I've spoken to on fixed incomes, you know, an extra $250 after the holidays on January 31st, an extra $100 after the holidays on January 31st hurts. And again, I'll say it, that's why I'm not in support of the 16.5% tax increase, property tax increase.
It not only hurts, it's impossible for a lot of us.
I agree with you.
When does the decision have to be reached?
So can you just tell the last step of the process of what's going on for the budget, so everybody can kind of understand what's, kind of like what's left of what's happening?
Sure, so at this point, several amendments have been submitted. My understanding is other council members will be submitting proposed budget amendments as well. Right now, the council is going to vote on a budget on March 20th after a public hearing. Right now, the council is in the process of having several special meetings to discuss the amendments that have been proposed, to go through those amendments and discuss them more. Right now, I believe March 19th and March 18th is also being discussed. Once we have a quorum, meaning 5 or more of the council members who can attend, those special meetings will become official and we'll be able to further discuss those amendments. But the final budget does have to be passed by the council per our city charter on March 20th.
Is there a public meeting where people can come and public comment?
Yes, so the public meeting is going to occur before the vote, I believe it's 7 p.m. Okay? So 7 p.m. public hearing on the 10th, right? The 20th. We're not scheduled the 20th. Yeah, so 7 p.m. Public hearing on the budget. So anyone who has, you know, is in a position to come down, certainly welcome it. Public comment for the public hearing. To speak and how you feel about the budget as a whole, the 16.5% tax increase, or anything else along with it. Because let's not forget, the proposed tax increase is not only 16.5%. The proposed budget also calls for about $2.4 million of our general fund to be used to break even in this year's budget, along with another $1.1 million of interfund balance to be used. So I think it's about a total of $3.5 to $3.6 million that's also being used to break even on the annual estimate.
So basically, that's about a 20% increase then.
Sure, and I think, I think a lot of us heard the mayor's proposal. I think there were 3 options that he went through per his budget proposal. The first was a straight tax increase, which I think came out around 26%. The second was using only general fund balance, and the third was a combination of the two, which the mayor eventually did propose, a combination of tax increase and a combination of using the general fund. So that's the proposal as I understand it, 16.5% property tax increase along with 2.4 million of the general fund and roughly 1.1 million of interfund balance. So I think it's about $3.6 million from the fund balance as well. And if any of those numbers are incorrect, I encourage anyone to check the Ecode 360 website. The proposed budget is there for you to take a look at as well, so you can go through and see everything that's being proposed.
Either way, it's not too good.
And we can send that all to you in a recap on the email. I can put all that information in there for you.
I'd like to just comment and say that whatever property tax increase ends up being levied is not just on this year.
Right.
It's this year and forever until it gets cut. So it's not just a 1-year annual increase. It's an annual increase that continues for who knows how long, maybe forever.
Yeah, and you know what, and that's a good point. I think we also have to consider that this property tax increase proposal, we can't look at it in a vacuum. It's not just 16.5% increase on your city taxes. We also have county taxes. We have grocery bills. Spectrum cable just went up. So we have to consider all of these things, and I think the COLA increase was somewhere in the neighborhood of 3.25%. So when we talk about those on fixed income getting an increase in their Social Security of 3.25%, but then the cost of all these other daily activities, daily essentials are going up more than 3.25% along with these property tax, proposed property tax increase. So I think you're right when you have to say it's not only 16.5% this year, it may be that way moving forward, but also not in a vacuum with all these other considerations being taken into account as well.
Are any efforts being made to improve the oversight and the monitoring of the financial processes so we're not in this position again where spending just went crazy and we to a point where you need to have a 16.5% tax increase? I mean, there are reasons why that happened. Are they being addressed so they don't happen again?
So the question was whether there were any steps being taken to provide more oversight of the city's finances to prevent perhaps overspending from happening in the future. Right now, currently, the city does not have a budget director. And you know, well, you just hired one. Yeah. Okay. So prior, I'll rephrase. Prior to when the annual estimate was being proposed, there was no budget director. And you know, I've been on the council now since January 1st, and you know, I learned from the past. So I looked at old council meetings, budget meetings. One thing I noticed was there were several questions asked of the budget director. What is the specifics of this line? What is the specifics of this line? So I think, you know, having a budget director to go through these finances so the council's in a position to ask these questions to a professional and someone who could speak line by line, I think will certainly benefit the city moving forward, at least in my opinion.
Did you say they hired the budget director?
In April, right?
But my understanding, at least, is during our budget meetings, the council's budget meetings, there wasn't the budget director.
Correct.
Who the council usually asks several questions of. I know, you know, I would have had a laundry list of questions, but at the same time, we have to work with what we have, and the council did that and proposed certain revisions based on our understanding of what would best help the city.
And in the future, if something, there's a budget director, and God forbid that he or she is hit by a bus or something, what happens then? Who does that responsibility shift to in the interim until you can hire a new one? Because that seems to be the problem in this case, is we're speaking. So.
Well, I'll say, you know, I don't know if there's an official shift of that position, but the default might be to the comptroller. The assistant comptroller, to have those numbers, to be in a position to provide the council with certain figures. For example, let's say a certain number of proposed tax revisions do pass. It'll be up to the comptroller to calculate the new tax levy based on what passes. So that's an example of, you know, if something were to happen to the future budget director, to kind of shift certain responsibilities to the comptroller's office in the end.
And did this happen in previous scenario? Or?
Well, my understanding is the comptroller's office did at least have, you know, personally, I have not spoken with the office on this. The comptroller did come in during one of our budget meetings, and we were able to ask about a few lines. If you watched the medical benefits was an example. The police and fire medical benefits were a question that we asked about, and different things like that. But you know, when we're as a council given an opportunity only during a certain day, you know, the window's smaller to ask those questions as opposed to having a budget director there for each of the meetings.
If everyone's able to attend, too.
If everyone's able to attend, which is always, you know, everyone has certain schedules.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're gonna stop questions. If you have any, you can ask him right afterwards. He'll still be here. Just a couple things real quick, guys. We may have to change our location. These meetings are getting bigger. More people are showing up. And unfortunately, we can only have a capacity of 25 here. So we have been offered, ICANN has offered the Children's Museum as a space, has more parking, it's handicap accessible, right down the road.
It'll be easier to hear.
It'll be easier to hear, so we won't run into a meeting.
It's hard to hear.
So we won't run into a meeting where we're all trying to listen, so.
We have PAs.
They have everything we would need there. So,
Actually, it's down this.
okay, great, thank you. Down that way, like step.
You're right, it is.
It's down that way.
Oh,
I
that's
get
down there?
confused. But anyway, those are, I think we're gonna lean towards possibly going that way, or, did we?
I don't know.
We're gonna look over a
Maybe
couple
the
things,
other
but
side. I
maybe
always
the other
like
side.
being there, Kim.
So we're kind of debating on where we're gonna go next, but next month we probably will be, we might be in the
Yeah,
location.
so please keep an eye out for wherever we are, 'cause it might not be here.
What about the Uptown Theater? Do they have a meeting space in there?
Yeah, but there's stuff going on Mondays, and we'd have to move the meeting.
Well, move the meeting to a different night, Stacy.
Well, we're gonna stick with the meetings where they're
I
at.
think the other side is pretty small.
Yeah.
So ICANN has offered a big space, we can hear everything in there, it's got great parking, it's handicap accessible. We'll keep you updated on that, but next month we probably might be there.
All right,
So, I wanna thank Joe for giving us an update on everything. You guys also keep following and watching the Common Council. You can watch it live and you can attend the meetings and hear things for yourself. We'll update you with some stuff in the email tonight or tomorrow.
Thanks to Heather, she sends the best follow-up email.
Thank you.
Okay?
Does anyone have any other questions or concerns about the meetings or anything else?
We're wrapping up just because it's a very challenging
Yep.
I have one
environment today.
follow-up comment. The Common Council has the authority in this situation, not the mayor, the Common Council. And there's a board of estimate and apportionment that is a major player in financial deliberations and decisions for the city. This Common Council has the authority, it votes. It decides what the tax rate is going to be. And everybody should be watching. Yes.
I'm Jack Leonard from Councilman Clark. And by the way, you guys are very lucky to have Joe as your council here. One of the issues that we're running up against, that we haven't really run up against in the past budget meetings, is that nobody has a pure majority. So typically when the Democrats were the majority, we had 6 people and they had 3. Now that we don't have a supermajority, either side has a supermajority. Come the 20th, we're going to present the mayor with a budget. Let's say it's 10%, let's say it's 5%. You know, it's not going to be 60.5. We have a lot of things that we're looking at. But what it is that we don't have that veto power, so the mayor's going to get that. And he's going to take it. And he has like 2 or 3 days, I think it's 4 days the actual, and he's going to veto the amount of amendments that he decides he wants to veto until he gets to where he wants on his budget. Then he's going to give it back to us, okay, a couple days later. And if we don't have a supermajority on any of the budget amendments that we did, that he nixed on us, then whatever he decides on, that's his budget. So we'll get one last shot at it. And but if he has the veto power on whatever we give, if we can get some of the Republicans to join us on some of these amendments. We're probably going to vote for all the Republicans' amendments. I hope that the Republicans in turn vote on some of our amendments to see if we can get this down. And it's you know, we're hoping that we all work together on this. We're not going to do anything that's going to hurt us. We took a look at this and we went through each line, and we didn't use a chainsaw, we used a smoker. And just took a little off where we thought we could, you know, where we can make a difference. And you take a little off, it actually compounds into a pretty large amount in the end there. But in the end, because we don't have the supermajority, come the 24th or whenever he decides to veto everything, or he decides, you know, down the road it's going to be his, so he'll own it. So I just hope he works with it.
I'll just add that if there's no supermajority on the council, then the whole council is responsible.
Okay, all right.
You
well,
ought
then,
to get together on that.
That's a very good point.
True. Thank you.